right, happy Monday Night Live, you guys. So tell me if this sounds like you. This is the case for reverse dieting. So you've been trying to lose weight for a while, and the weight loss starts off going really well. You're in that 90-day honeymoon period, right? And everything eventually slows down and pretty much comes to a screeching halt or a stop altogether, which I'm going to be talking about next week for you. And you decide to cut your calories further or do more cardio. While that works for just a little while, your progress plateaus again and again and again, and you are super discouraged. And this cycle is just repeated over and over again until you're likely eating an absurdly low amount of calories again and doing quite a bit of cardio, or you think you're not doing enough at the gym. So you probably feel pretty worn down, hungry, achy, have very little energy, your digestion has slowed, and you don't feel very good in the gym, or maybe you quit going to the gym altogether because nothing was working. This is the case for reverse dieting, and this is one of the reasons why we've got to get more calories into your system, because both your workouts, progress, weight loss, all of these things have stalled. They've pretty much come to a screeching halt. So though the cutting of calories even further sounds like a nightmare to you, what needs to happen is, in order for you to lose this weight that you know you still need to lose, you have to add more food. It just doesn't make sense. Because you're eating less, you're exercising more, and all of the information on the internet tells you that you should be losing weight. Well, guess what? Your body has adapted to your stalled progress for years now. It is adapted every single time you put it into a calorie restriction for an extended period of time. So we're going to the whiteboard. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay. So I have a couple diagrams. Please don't laugh. Please don't make fun of me. But we've got girl number one over here. And you can see girl number one, looks like she has broken hands. I'm not the best of artists here. So girl number one over here trains 7 sessions a week. She's 32 years old, 158 pounds, 30% body fat, which is pretty normal for where I get people between 30 and 40% body fat. That's why I always recommend having a DEXA scan done when you start macro tracking to see where your body fat percentage is. So girl number one was 30% body fat. She was 5'7", weighed 158 pounds, 32 years old. When she came to me, her average macros were 20 grams of fat, 60 grams of carbs, and 140 protein. So she was pretty much low carb, low fat, almost a competitor or fitness competitor mentality here. So you can see girl number one is eating 560 calories from protein, only 180 from dietary fat, extremely dangerous. Girl number one also had hypothyroidism, and what I thought at the time might have been low testosterone, which we discovered years later was zero testosterone, which, as you know, for females is quite bad. Girl number one was burning protein primarily for fuel because she didn't have enough carbs to actually not be catabolic and to not have her body go after protein because her dietary fat was so low and so were her carbohydrates. So the next place that your body will go is to preserve, and it will start burning protein for fuel, which means you will lose muscle. So girl number one had pretty much lost quite a bit of muscle. She was running completely on empty. She needed to go to the emergency room because she was in such a catabolic or muscle eating phase. She binged on the weekends, had a hard time eating out, had a hard time eating anything that was quote unquote not clean. And then also she had a hard time with feeling very little guilt for having a treat once in a while. So girl number one had a very disordered eating concept of herself. Where she should have been for maintenance was 2370. She was eating 980 calories. She was in a 1390 or 1400 calorie deficit. So girl number one, it was in a desperate place. Now we go over to girl number two, another girl who works out 5 days a week, weightlifting pretty intensely from an hour to 2 hours, just 5 days a week, 2 rest days. Girl number two is 36 years old, where girl number one was 32 years old, meaning girl number two is older. 15% body fat at 136 pounds and also 5'7". Her macros are 135 protein, and you heard me right, 475 grams of carbs and 68 grams of fat for a total of 3,052 calories. Girl number 2 had a goal to be a power lifter and do a competition for powerlifting. So we needed to get girl number 2 into a position where she was actually putting on lean body mass. And I knew that with this girl, because she had done things so correctly in her past, that when I went to diet her, if I needed to cut her for her competition, I could get her down quickly because she had so many calories. So her macros, again, 3,052 calories, 135p, 540 calories coming from protein, 1,900 from carbs, because that was really important to fuel her through her workouts, and because she was lifting so heavy, to also give her enough protein and carbs for her recovery. She ate like an athlete versus starving and binging cycles, and you can see that girl number 2 was 15% body fat versus 30% body fat that girl number 1 was on in her starvation diet. So again, girl number 1 and girl number 2, same height. Girl number 1, little younger, eating hardly anything in the emergency room in a 1,400 calorie deficit with a sad face. Total calories just under 1,000 to girl number 2 at 3,052 calories. Now, girl number 2 got very, very lean as I started to drop her calories so that I could get her to lift at 132 pounds for powerlifting. So we kept her at or above for her building phase. She was actually, I projected her to be at about 2,150 calories, 2,100 calories for her proposed maintenance. She far surpassed that maintenance by 1,000 calories. So it's safe to say that maintenance is a moving target, especially as you build up your metabolic rate. So this is going to blow your mind right now. Are you ready? Girl 1 was me when I started macro tracking 10 years ago. And girl number 2 was me about 4 years ago at my very highest intake. Can you believe that? So I had been macro tracking for 4 years to go from 980 calories up to 3,052 calories at 15% body fat. So I dropped half of my body fat. Can you believe that? Half of my total body fat. I was at 30% body fat when I started macro tracking. All right. So now, we flipped the script, right? So not everybody is going to be a finely tuned athlete, and not everybody is going to want to do competitions. We just want to look good naked, don't we? That's the real truth. We want to feel great in our skin. We want to be healthy. We want to see awesome lab work. And we also want to look great naked or in a swimsuit. So the reason that you stalled progress is quite simple. The reason that you're with me is quite simple. When you cut calories, however small your deficit might be, your metabolism will begin to downshift and downregulate in an effort to conserve its energy for survival. Homeostasis, right? The body doesn't care about anything except survival. Of course, someone would call right in the middle of my live. So what you need to make sure that you're doing is following the reverse diet carefully. When you're eating out, don't expect for me to change your macros that often, right? If you're having alcohol, don't expect for me to change your macros very often. You already decided to change them that week. And that's okay, because we want to learn how to maneuver through those practices and processes before we get to the holidays. Because after the holidays, for those of you who have to cut in order to get to your goal weight, you are going to have to make some big sacrifices, and we never do that during the holidays. In an effort to conserve energy, when your body goes into survival mode, people call this fat storage mode. That's not really what it is, okay? Your body's always using fuel, whether it's fat, carbs, protein if you don't have enough carbs. Basically, what it does is it starts to be in a phase where it manufactures less metabolism-friendly hormones like thyroid, testosterone, leptin, ghrelin, so that the body can actually be at homeostasis and upregulate itself. So for a simple picture of how this happens, take a 500 calorie deficit, which is what I normally have people either start in or less. And I like it to be less than that because 500 calories still makes some people have the tendency to want to binge. We don't want you to binge, so it really doesn't matter if our calorie deficit is 250 calories or 500. What matters is if we can sustain it, right? because we're going to get there one way or another. And being in a 500 calorie deficit isn't going to get you there faster than being in a 250 necessarily. Okay. So I think that clears up a lot of confusion with people about crash dieting, because again, we are supposed to lose about 1/2 pound to 1.5 pounds of weight a week, but that is not going to happen forever, or you would obviously wilt away to nothing, right? Wither away. Along the way, the weight loss process, your body begins to slow down its metabolism to convert valuable energy to glucose. And as you drop body fat, you're going to need more fuel, right? From the right sources. But overall, when you get lighter, you will not require as many calories for maintenance, right? So we've got to find that perfect threshold. The idea of reverse dieting is simple, and the name explains it. What you do is slowly start adhering and adding calories back into your diet so that you don't see what's called refeed syndrome. And we do that slowly over time. Many people immediately cringe at the thought of eating more or adding calories to their weight loss plan, because in the past, when they did that, they would gain very quickly. Well, that's because you were not at calorie balance, and now all of you are. And that's the beautiful thing, is a lot of you have started with me and you were with prior other macro coaches. Let me get into my spot, my position here. I'm going to take a seat because I'm getting pretty warm, getting worked up over this reverse dieting. So exciting. So a lot of you were with other macro coaches before you came into our program. And basically, those coaches did not have the tight-knit restriction that you need to have in order for some people to actually see results in the beginning, especially when we are trying to lose weight while we are reverse dieting. So a lot of us are trying to lose a little bit of our body fat while getting adherent, learning how to eat out. And what people don't understand is that each and every one of these macros has a very important job. One, carbs are your body's first energy source. Basically, they are preferred fuel. If you are an athlete and your body goes looking for carbs and they are not there, and your fat is not high enough for you to be burning off of ketone bodies, then what is going to happen is your body is going to go after protein next for fuel, not fat. It is going to store fat. It's the same thing if you don't have enough dietary fat in your protocol as well. And then your carbs are also a little bit lower. And that's one of the most common mistakes that I see, is that people actually are in a calorie deficit when they come to me, but not a calorie deficit that is structured for their personal fat loss, okay? So that's a beautiful thing about coming and getting yourself into a program where we're actually looking at getting you to a place where you can diet successfully. Like girl one, she never could have dieted, could she? She was eating 980 calories. What are we gonna cut? We can't cut anything else out of girl one's diet plan. And girl one had just been adding and accumulating body fat, month after month. So basically with carbs, we store about 200 to 300 grams of glucose in the muscle and the liver. And that would be already stored in there, kind of like a reserve fuel tank. What you guys are eating in your meals is basically slow and perfect doses of carbs and fat that will keep you sustained between those eating windows, right? So you guys, let's say you're going to a conference and you know you're not going to be able to eat before the conference or at the conference, and then you have an hour drive on the way home. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to eat a nice meal that is actually bigger, like maybe let's say it would be breakfast and party or snack macros. Then you're going to bring a bar with you and you're going to have a really nice big dinner when you get back home, because the majority of your food is going to need to be eaten early in that bigger breakfast, brunch, if you will. Then if you don't have time to eat anything at your conference, no big deal. A lot of people are flying, no big deal. Bring a bar with you, have that bar so that you're not just absolutely ravenous for dinner. Eat that on the way home or wherever you get a chance. Push dinner out for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then go ahead and have your larger dinner. Because basically what ends up happening is your body's going to use all of those carbs first. But when we don't eat carbs, we lose out on very, very important things. This is the biggest issue that I have with intermittent fasting, which I know we are going to see the data on because I was part of the pilot group at ASU. I know it's coming. My thesis was actually used partially for the insulin resistance group as well, because my thesis was on autoimmune and insulin resistance, primarily in PCOS, okay? And PCOS is not autoimmune. So basically what I had to provide for them is a basis for them to understand that people who had autoimmune did have the tendency to have metabolic syndrome X and insulin resistance, okay? And that PCOS very much mimicked that exact same parameters. And again, what we found is that that was very true. In fact, the autoimmune population, 75% of them did have factors that we would consider to be metabolic syndrome X or insulin resistance. All right, now these can be reversed, and that is what's beautiful about this. Same thing when people go into a keto cycle, which we're going to be talking about next week, or a fad dieting cycle where they've been intermittent fasting. Those can cause some damage to your insulin and make it less responsive or more responsive, which is not always good. We don't want insulin to be knocking and no one answers the door. And no one answers the door. And then when somebody does answer the door, meaning you have your first meal, boom, it's like a rush flood of these people. Think about the CIA or the FBI just rushing into your house and ravaging everything they can off of your shelves, right? That's the way that I would explain insulin getting back into those cells, and then your body is just legitimately sucking that up, right? Well, what ends up happening is it's going to start flooding the system. We are not going to be using all of that insulin probably, because again, people that intermittent fast usually have a larger meal and they eat within this small and tiny window, which makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. Although they talk about it being better for GI function, all of the data that I have that shows that balanced meal pairing would be better is definitely the case, because if we keep putting these big logs on this well-burning fire, basically all that's doing is smothering this perfectly well-burning fire, right? So if you're having 2 huge meals within an 8-hour time frame, because that's your intermittent fasting window, think about this for a minute, you guys. It's pretty much an oxymoron. Now, it's not an oxymoron for people who have an issue with overeating all day. That might work really well for that population. So if we have an overeater that consumes 5,000 calories a day and you give him only an 8-hour window and he eats 2,500 calories in that 8-hour window, he's now in a calorie deficit, right? And that might work for him for fat loss. But is it long-term sustainable to eat like that? And because your friends are going out at 8 o'clock, you can't eat with them because you already superseded your eating window. So I'm going to be talking about that at length next week. That really is not the most educated way to do something. The most educated way to do something, in my opinion, would be to look at where the person's carbs, fats, and protein are. Fats are super important too. A lot of you have heard me talk about this if you've been in the program for longer than a month. Dietary fat is absolutely pivotal for hormone health as well. Thyroid will not function well without carbs or fat, okay? If our dietary fat is too low, and Dr. Alex and I are actually going to be doing a discussion on this pretty soon again, what we see is infertility a lot of times. And most of those people, if they eat what they need as far as macro structure, they will usually get pregnant within 90 days, which is very, very cool. The other thing with a lot of women who can't get pregnant, maybe because of PCOS, is also because they are what I would call very high A1C, okay? So A1C is your total glucose average for the last 3 months. And if your A1C is too high, that can also cause infertility issues. So we don't want to be on one side of the spectrum or the other. We want to go right down dead center, the middle. We want to be perfectly proportioned on the days that we can. And then on days where we want to have a little more fun, we will, right? Why? Because we are 90-10 and we are flexible dieters. So fat, second energy source. This absolutely fuels our brain, cushions our joints, keeps us healthy. And remember, without fat, we are not going to be able to lose body fat very well, because again, when the body gets too low in either 3 of these banks, it's smart. Physiologically, it's going to do what it needs to do to overcompensate. So that's why it is so important to do a reverse diet. Now, if we have no carbs in our diet, and for those of you who've tried keto dieting or low carb dieting, where do we get our fiber from, right? Carbs have fiber, and it's really important for us to get our fiber needs met as well as our micronutrient needs met. I'm going to be doing a part 2 on this series because it's going to be pretty long, and I'm going to take it into next week's, and then we'll merge right into keto, fad dieting, and why those diet plans might work for a small percentage of the population, but we've got to look at dieting in one respect, and that is, what does the long-term sustainability look like? If we learn how to macro track and we learn how to weigh our food out, we are going to be able to eyeball our food and not use the food scale at all if we want to, and we're pretty good at eyeballing for the rest of our lives. I do it for 4 or 5 months out of the year. I just am more flexible and I don't use my food scale as much. I might weigh 1 or 2 of my meals, but for the most part, you guys have been doing this for 10 years. I should be pretty good at it by now, right? You, after a few months, will be able to test yourself. And you can start by doing it now when you're prepping your food. Just guesstimate what you're putting onto the plate and put it on your food scale. And if you say, hey, I think that's 3.2 ounces and it's 3.3, you're really getting good at your eyeballing, right? So protein is pretty much the superhero of the 3 macros. It helps feed muscle tissue, repair it, helps with your teeth, your nails, it builds muscle mass. So most of you are so low in your calorie intake when you first start out that you couldn't possibly be adding muscle mass. Some of you have asked me, is this scale weight muscle mass? And I'm like, nope, it's not. It's normal 1 to 3 pound fluctuation for any reason that is always gone by the end of the week. And then I give them examples of their trending and they're like, oh, you're right. I'm only losing weight. I'm not gaining. I'm like, no, your incremental gains from day to day are not gains. If you look at yourself from the beginning of the month to the end of the month and you've lost weight, you didn't gain weight, right? And that's what's most important, is taking someone from where they are, not overfeeding them, not overtaxing the GI system because they were in such a great calorie deficit that the one thing we know that's slowed down now is GI function and brain cognition, right? The biggest feedback, or the greatest thing that I hear in feedback the first couple weeks that someone starts with me is, wow, I don't have any cravings. Great. Well, your insulin is balanced. If you've been eating balanced meals, your insulin is now balanced. You can even nail the timing absolutely perfectly if you want to every day that you have an opportunity to do that. And what you're going to see is on the days where you do have perfect meal timing. And again, meal timing is a myth. It doesn't mean you're going to lose more body fat. But the more standard you keep these meals to around the same time, your body's going to ask for those meals around that time every day. Isn't that cool? The body's super smart. That's your insulin. And again, it's leptin and ghrelin. And as you get leaner and you drop body fat, those leptin levels can sometimes be a little off and you'll start getting those hunger cravings again. And thus you're reaching out and saying, hey, Kelly, I need a little bit of help. I'm starting to get hungry at night again. What do I do? And I'm like, whew, guess what? You're cutting right now. You are going to have some hunger when you cut. You're cutting calories, right? And that is why it is so important for us to actually slowly get your calories up to a place where we can cut them without it being painful and you starting over in that same place that you were when you came to me, which was eating nothing. Every time you ate, you gained. Well, of course, you've been starving yourself, so your body pulls anything it gets in addition into a surplus and pulls it. So that's the biggest thing, is that we will now not be in a place where we have to worry so much about that, because the further away from starvation that you get and the closer to maintenance, the better the metabolism is going to start to respond. So a lot of you have seen it takes almost a month for your body to pick up, kind of like the gas pedal on the car and the clutch. If you're pushing the gas down, but it's not enough, and you're pulling up on the clutch so that there's that threshold there, if you're driving a stick, that is, basically at some point, you're going to be giving it enough gas to actually go. That is exactly like the metabolism. It's a great analogy. So when you get to that place with your calories, a lot of you are starting to see that it was way higher than you thought it should be because of all the things you hear on the internet about how you should be eating 1,200 calories and doing an hour of cardio a day. Guess what? That is not a solution for everyone. In fact, it's not a solution for anyone. Even a 12-year-old should not be on 1,200 calories, right? So how could a grown adult survive on 1,200 calories? And why do doctors tell everyone that has any form of cholesterol issues, blood sugar issues, that they should be on 50 grams of carbs? That is absolutely the biggest pet peeve that I have ever heard from doctors. And it makes me so angry, because how do you know what this person actually needs? Do you know their metabolic rate? Have you asked them what they eat? Have you looked at their intake? No. Do you know what their lifestyle is like? Have you tracked any of their expenditure? No, I do. I look at your expenditure so that I can make the modifications according to your expenditure so that we're not pushing the gas pedal down, but you're lifting up on the clutch, which means more exercise, right? So basically, boom, then it's going to stall. The car is going to stall, right? You can't have both. You cannot add cardio when you add food, okay? If you add food and then you go out cardio, what you just did, you're going to plateau. That's why it's always good to stick right where you are with your current expenditure for many months, even 3 months at a time. Just stick with what you're doing when you start if you're in a big calorie deficit, right? All of you that are with me, except one person, and that's Grace, are in a calorie deficit. Grace actually came to me eating a decent amount of food, and she is now actually in a calorie deficit, which is super cool. She's like girl too. She's like Supergirl over that I showed you guys on the whiteboard. So I took Grace and I said, awesome, this is really easy. All I have to do is manipulate these 2 places. I told her today I'm going to be increasing protein just a little. I won't do it too much, but I've got to keep you satiated while I start bringing your energy down, which is fats and carbs, right? Those are first and second energy, our body's preferred resources. We don't ever want our body to really be burning proteins for fuel because that would insinuate that we could be burning lean body mass. Now, if you're not eating enough calories when you come into the program, the reverse diet is beautiful because at some point you're going to be moving yourself from calorie balance and adherence to long-term sustainable nutrition, which is going to allow you to go into a calorie surplus or get close to your maintenance, which means that if you're looking to gain lean body mass or muscle, right, a little bit of muscle, or you get down and you got your body fat off, now you see that things are a little jiggly, we need to build muscle underneath there. It is the perfect time to start fueling in a calorie surplus, staying lean, loving the way we look and everything, but trying to push that threshold of maintenance higher and higher without gaining weight. So most people, if they go into a maintenance phase or a building phase, will stay right about the same weight for about a month until their body gets to a place where it's like, okay, we have additional calories, go ahead and build muscle. You are not going to build muscle in a calorie deficit, most of you. Unfortunately, you are not, okay? So could you be maintaining muscle? Yes, and that's what I shoot for, and that's why I really am kind of strict about protein, the superhero of macros. Again, I know everybody's so hard on me about, I don't want to eat any protein. Well, guess what? Then I can't tell you that if you don't hit your protein requirements, you're not going to lose muscle during your dieting phase. You've got to get that protein in the mix, okay? So, 1, why do we lose weight at some point in the reverse diet? Well, 1, you guys are finally eating at calorie balance, meaning you're hitting the same calories every day because your macros are the same every day. 2, you are becoming more adherent with your food scale, with barcode scanning, with eating out. A lot of you have figured out that eating out is not really that good, and you can make these things at home and they taste better. And so you're like, this is a big, huge waste. I might as well eat clean when I go out. Well, that's what I do. Anything I want to make, I make at home because I know it's going to be accurate and it's probably going to taste better because we've got more options and resources at home than these chain restaurants do, right? So that's kind of what I do. If I'm really wanting to have tacos, I make tacos at home. If I'm really wanting to have pizza, I make pizza at home. If I'm really wanting to have a nice burrito, I make it at home because I don't know what's going into my food at the restaurant. We don't know, and that is not adherent. It's not accurate. So long term, once we get to accuracy after 10 to 14 days of established hitting your macros with no alcohol, no HAP, you're going to start to see adaptation occur. Well, what does that mean? That means that when we adapt, the body is going to start to downshift again or shift up. If we've added calories, it's going to start burning fuel efficiently, and it's going to start letting go of body fat because it's now not afraid because it knows it's going to get the same amount of calories every single day. So it will let go of a little, and then it will start to panic. Okay, that's when we need to, as your 7-day reviews come in, add more food incrementally to make sure that we push through those quitting points and those plateaus. The only way to do that is to get it over for the analyst to look at. And a lot of you heard me say today, I can't give you any modifications because you didn't send your scale weight. If I don't have your scale weight, I can't really predict. And if I only have 2 scale readings out of the week, I really can't predict because I can't see your midweek low. The only thing I can see is the starting weight and the end of the week weight. So if you're doing that because you're feeling stressed out about weighing yourself, that's okay. And it's fine to do, but it just makes it very hard for me to do my job extremely well when I don't have the data that I need, okay? So the only reason we weigh ourselves every day is not because I want you guys to jump off a cliff or that scale weight even matters day to day. It doesn't. It matters zero. What I want to see is that midweek low so that I can guesstimate, do I need to hold this person for another week for adaptation? Now it's starting to make sense, isn't it, you guys? There's no reason for you to stress the scale whatsoever. It is just so that the mastermind can do their work. So if you have Sandy as your coach, if you have Pete as your coach, after about 6 to 8 weeks, you realize, oh, I need to trust the process, because you go back and look at your starting place and you're like, wow, on the weeks where I don't hap or drink alcohol, I lose weight. Great. Well, yeah. So if you never do that in the beginning, you will never see that trending, and neither will we, right? So that's why it's really important for us to analyze the data and to say, hey, and you guys have heard me do this. I will ask you for 10 to 14 days with no hap. I will ask you if I haven't seen it for 10 to 14 days with no alcohol, or limit to one drink if you drink twice or 3 times a week, so that I can actually see the data that I need to see. So does everybody lose in a reverse diet? No, because not everybody has to reverse diet. Just like I said, Grace didn't need to reverse diet. I'm sure that she will be fine with me using her as super girl number 2. Because really that's some ideal situation, is for somebody to come to you eating enough calories so that you can actually diet them, where it's 99% of the time the reverse, where somebody comes in and they're eating in such a calorie deficit, it's going to take you 2 or 3 months to even get them to lose weight sometimes. So no, everybody doesn't lose in the beginning of a reverse diet. What ends up happening if they were to add calories faster, and the reason we don't do that is because of refeed syndrome. We don't want people to see rapid fat regain, so we slowly add, because again, we don't want to overwhelm the GI system with too much bulk. And a lot of you know, the first and second week you were with me, you were like, man, this is a lot of food. Well, it wasn't. It was the same amount of macros. It's just that you're not hungry because you're now pairing your meals properly with a protein, fat, fiber, and carb at every meal, where before you were having carbs and fat at every meal with maybe a tiny little bit of protein in a couple of your meals. Well, that's not going to keep you very full, is it? No, it's not, because you were missing a very key and critical element, weren't you? So again, we do not want to overwhelm the GI with too much bulk from proteins, fats, and fiber. So it is really important that we get these meal pairing proposals down, and I look at your structure and I say, hey, do you like 3 meals? I just had this conversation with someone tonight, or I would prefer you go to 4 meals because I think you're going to do better with that. Now, if some days you want to have 3 larger meals and a smaller snack, that's cool. But again, we also don't want to reverse with the idea that we are going to lose body fat or any of these concepts, because really reverse dieting does one thing, and that is it helps us fix metabolic adaptations that have occurred from years and years of dieting phases, okay? The average American female diets for 17 to 20 years of her life. What a drag. You're never going to do that again. The average male American diets for 10 to 12 years of his life. Men don't live as long as women, so really it's the same. They both diet for a big chunk of their life, and that is such a bad hamster wheel to be on, just, beating down that hamster wheel over and over and over again. I'm going to gain all this weight during the holidays, and then it's going to take me from January to March to get it off. Or sometimes I see it January to May, depending on how careless the person is. I don't very often have anyone gain more than 3 pounds at the holidays ever. And I'll be honest with you, the average is about 1 to 1.25 pounds of gain, or we see 1 to 2 pounds of loss during the holiday season, which is really cool. I'd rather be in that negative zone where we lose weight or we maintain or we see just a small gain than to go back and say, now we have to go back to this restoration phase. We've undone all the good that we did during August, September, and October just to have fun for 1 month in December. Gosh darn it, that is really the law of subtraction, not the law of addition. So I do want you guys to be thinking in terms of gaining lean mass will only happen in a calorie surplus. It will not happen when you are in a calorie deficit. But We want to hit those protein requirements in our reverse diet because we don't want to lose any valuable muscle because it looks so good when you get lean. Hands down, what you see in people like myself when I get lean, Brandy, a lot of people like Trina, who has just absolutely crushed it this last year, program have seen their very best physique because they had muscle underneath there and they preserved it the whole time they dieted. So think addition, not restriction, because healthy fat loss and healthy mass gaining is going to come from years of long and sustainable nutrition. You guys have been doing it wrong for a lot of years, most of you, and now you're doing it right. And the more you do it right and the longer you stay in maintenance when you're not with me, the better your body's gonna look. And that's why it's so rewarding for me to do my job, because I will be honest with you, most people learn these processes and then they change their goal and they go off on their own, and a year from now they email me and they look 10 times better than they looked with me, and they looked pretty darn good when they were with me. But it's just so neat to be able to see how these practices, if implemented over time in years consistently, can change your mind about how you could look. Like Sandy, I'm going to give you an example. I wrote a post about Sandy, my lovely macro coach who was my assistant. Sandy started with me. She was overweight a little bit. You know, she probably had a good 10, 12 pounds to lose. She lost almost 20. She didn't come to me for fat loss. She only came to me to get her lab work looking healthy. We had that healthy within 90 to 120 days. Isn't that cool? She did the work though. I didn't do it. I was just the engineer. I put the plan together, I executed it, and I realized, wow, Sandy is type A. I love this type of person when it comes to lab work because I just tell her what to do. And much like Anthony Galgano, Sandy is kind of my female Anthony. You guys know I've talked about Anthony a lot. He literally put his nose down and started grinding. We're going to see how Anthony and Ashley do coming off a vacation this last week. I know that they did well. I definitely heard from them through the Boxer. They had me check a couple of their meals. I'm not worried about it. But what's so neat is that Anthony didn't go and undo all of the progress in his lab work in a couple days. That's not even normal. That won't happen. If you learn these practices and you use the 80-20 rule and you're reverse dieting and you're allowing your coach to slowly add that food, even at the cost of staying the same weight for a few weeks at a time, guess what? You are going to be in such a better place to actually diet when we need to get those last 5 to 7 or 10 pounds off. It's not going to be painful. You're not going to be chewing off your arm because you're so hungry. You're not going to be laying in bed like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry, I could just die right now. And you're not going to binge. And that is the biggest thing, is that people restrict and then they end up binging every weekend. And then the hamster wheel is the wheel that they get right back onto again. They start beating themselves up Monday through Friday, only to binge on Saturday and Sunday, and back in the hamster wheel they go on Monday again. So we must, in the reverse diet, learn to eat out successfully and hit our macros, right? A lot of you guys did so well this last week. So thank you for listening to my Friday night fireside chat. I can tell that it hit a lot of people where it needed to hit them. We are not going to fad diet anymore. We are not going to use labels anymore. We are not going to label foods good or bad. We are going to stop trying to use the scale weight as the indicator. We're going to use the way our clothing fits. We're going to look in the mirror and tell ourselves positive affirmations, because what you think of yourself is exactly what is going to happen in your fat loss phases. If you say, oh, well, I'm down on the scale, but I still look fat in my midsection, well, then it will be, right? So what I want you to start doing is talking to yourself positively, taking measurements, taking photographs. A lot of you guys sent me your photos this week for the Sober October contest, and just to be accountable. Thank you for doing that. In fact, I think I got over a dozen progress photos, and that's in addition to Trainerize. Everybody in Trainerize updates their photos pretty routinely every week, and if they don't, I don't know why they're not doing that, but I need to crack the whip a little bit more, right? So use those photos. I hung a dress up yesterday that I am going to get into for Christmas this year. So that gives me a goal for 10 to 11 weeks. I know I'm not going to go off kilter on Thanksgiving. I never do, because I don't like Thanksgiving food personally. You guys are not either, because you are going to have every estimate for every single thing that you want to have. And if you would like to eat everything on Thanksgiving that you like in bits and pieces, then we will definitely be able to do that this year. Why? because we're going to eat like we should ahead of time so that we can enjoy maybe a majority of our calories at our Thanksgiving feast with our family. So again, I want you guys to look at changing your long-term relationship with food. The reverse diet is structured to do that. Cutting is not structured to do that. If you do have to cut at the end of your reverse diet, and we'll see if that happens, I won't know that because your metabolism might pick up and you might lose all of your desired weight in the reverse like a lot of people do. We really won't know that until we've had a good 120 days in the program. We reassess everything. We look at how things are going. And again, I never want you guys to have to struggle because again, we don't want poor labs just because of our lack of awareness or our lack of, fruition or our lack of, going in and actually completing these practices. We are going to make mistakes. You are getting better and better at asking for help. You're getting better and better at using the boxer. And again, reverse dieting responsibly is going to be the best way to do it. So next week, I'm going to pick up on how and why we restore metabolic rate with the reverse diet. I'm going to let you guys go because I know this was a little bit over a half an hour tonight. And then what we're going to do is we'll talk a little bit about ditching the rigid rules and fad dieting. We'll go into ketogenic versus paleo versus intermittent fasting next week. Thank you for joining me tonight, you guys. I hope this makes great sense. If you missed the beginning of this lecture, please go back and look at Girl 1 versus Girl 2, and you will see that Girl 1 was me in the beginning and was in the emergency room and needed to do this absolutely important process. Take care.